Hello everybody. First and foremost, I wish you all the very best for 2024. A huge thank you to everyone who has watched, subscribed, and engaged with our channel. Today's video is a deep dive into Costa Rica's current status and what the future holds for the country in 2024. We'll be looking at the economic, political, and social development of Costa Rica, guided by two pivotal sources of information. My analysis is based on the annual State of the Nation report by the Council of University Directors of Costa Rica, CONARE, and by the OECD Economic Survey of Costa Rica. Now, for those of you who want to delve deeper, I'll link both reports in the description for you. Let's start by understanding the foundational aspirations which are embedded in the Costa Rican Constitution. The current Constitution was drafted following the Armed Civil War of 1948, which was sparked over the results of the presidential elections of 1948. These goals are not just legal statements, they represent the promise of the Costa Rican government towards its citizens. The government pledges to stimulate production, ensure fair distribution of wealth, maintain harmony with the environment, provide quality education, and dignified employment, all within a democratic framework. Now, are these ambitious goals? And how close is Costa Rica to achieving them? According to the State of the Nation report, there's a complex picture emerging on these constitutional guarantees. First off, on stimulating production, they see a pattern of growth that unfortunately benefits only certain sectors, leaving behind others with minimal job and income growth. When it comes to fair distribution of wealth, there's a growing gap. Economic growth isn't translating into widespread well-being, leading to increased inequality. In terms of environmental harmony, Costa Rica has made notable strides in conservation, but there are still challenges in achieving a sustainable balance. As for education and employment, the country has historically used these vehicles for social mobility. However, today there are significant delays and barriers in these areas, affecting current and future generations. And finally, in the context of democracy, the report points out that while the political system is designed for cooperation, weaknesses, antagonism, and obstructions are hindering progress and human development. These findings set the stage for our discussion today, so let's dive into each of these areas and explore what they mean for the future of Costa Rica and what we can expect in 2024. So let's break down the economy. First, the population of Costa Rica is 5.2 million people, and the total size of the economy, GDP, is $78 billion. Just to put that in perspective, it is similar to the GDP of the U.S. state of Maine. Now, if we break down the Costa Rican economy by sectors, it consists of agriculture and forestry, 4.8%. Industry, which includes construction, is 22.45%. And the largest sector is the services sector, which is 72.8% of the economy. Now, according to estimations, the economy is expected to grow in 2024 in the 3.5 to 4% range. Costa Rica has emerged as a leading destination for foreign direct investment, particularly in its rapidly expanding free trade zones. These zones offer attractive incentives for international business, making them a hub for economic growth and innovation. Notably, Costa Rica continues to rank at the top in Latin America for its ability to attract foreign investment. An example of this success is the medical devices manufacturing sector. This sector has witnessed substantial growth, drawing in global giants like Johnson & Johnson. This company recently announced the building of a new facility spanning over 200,000 square feet, which is a significant milestone, promising to generate over 3,000 jobs in Costa Rica. With that, the employment sector is looking much better than it was just a few years ago. The country has been able to reduce unemployment from 24% just a few years ago to around 8% at this moment. The inflation rate in Costa Rica has been running between 8 to 9%, and the government has made substantial efforts to reduce inflation, and it is expected to hold under 2% for the first quarter of 2024. The Consumer Price Index, which is a basket of 289 products and services for consumption, indicate that the price of the majority has decreased or stayed the same. Now, based on that, the government has been reporting some negative inflation numbers. However, it does seem that many items in Costa Rica can be quite expensive compared to other Latin American countries, and even more expensive than some European countries. Let's now turn to the monetary policy, which is the domain of the Central Bank of Costa Rica, known locally as Banco Central de Costa Rica. The primary goals are threefold. First, there's a strong emphasis on inflation control, ensuring that the cost of living remains stable for its citizens. Second, it seeks to maintain stability of the national currency, the colón. And third, a crucial aspect of the policy is to ensure liquidity and credit within the economy. Now let's shift towards fiscal policy, particularly how the government raises and spends its money. The 2024 budget for Costa Rica is 12.63 billion Costa Rican colones, but where does this money come from? Interestingly, about 60% of it is generated from internal sources like taxes, while the remaining 40% is covered through borrowed money. Diving deeper into how this budget is allocated, we find that a significant chunk, about 46%, is dedicated to servicing the national debt. That's almost half of their entire budget. Next, 39.6% is used for the day-to-day running of the government. This includes everything from public services to administrative costs. Government pensions account for 9.5% of the budget. The judicial branch receives 3.9% to keep the legal system running. The legislative branch is allocated 0.6%, and the Election Supervision Department, ensuring fair and free elections, receives 0.4%. As we see, a substantial portion of the budget is focused on managing debt and running the government, which highlights the balancing act that the country performs in maintaining economic stability while fostering growth and development. Be sure to stay for the end of the video, where we're going to delve into the challenges Costa Rica is currently grappling with, as spotlighted in the recent State of the Nation report. But coming up next, let's take a closer look at Costa Rica's trade dynamics. What are the key exports and imports of the country? And let's analyze the emerging trends for 2024. First off, Costa Rica runs a trade deficit. That means they import more products than they export. According to the last trimester reported in 2023, the commercial deficit was 1.3 billion US dollars. Now, as far as the products that Costa Rica exports, it has made a large shift over the years, diversifying out of agricultural products, and now the vast majority of exports are in the medical devices sector. As we can see in the table below, the top exports, which I'm highlighting in yellow, are all related to the medical sector. These include medical devices, needles, catheters, prosthetics, transfusion devices, diagnostic equipment. So as you can see, this sector has become a very large component of the Costa Rican economy. And of course, the top companies that are manufacturing and exporting from Costa Rica are internationally recognized companies such as Abbott Medical, Boston Scientific, Edwards, and Baxter, just to name a few. So after medical devices, the next top exports of Costa Rica are agricultural products, with pineapple, bananas, coffee, and fruit juice concentrates being the top exported products. Our biggest trading partners that are purchasing these exports are the United States, which takes 45% of our exports, followed by Holland, Guatemala, and Belgium. How about our imports? What is Costa Rica buying? The largest imports are for oil and derivative oil products. After that, we have consumer goods, raw materials, construction materials, capital goods for agriculture, and the electrical and telecommunications industry. Now, the top countries that we purchase imports from are: 1, the United States, China, Mexico, and Malaysia. For 2024, Costa Rican exports are expected to continue to grow. Now, with major players like Johnson & Johnson establishing a presence in Costa Rica's free trade zones, we're witnessing a significant boost in this sector of the economy. This trend is further bolstered by the strategic moves of U.S. companies as they diversify their supply chains and increasingly view countries like Costa Rica as viable, attractive options. Next, let's review the impact that tourism has on the Costa Rican economy. Most of you watching have probably seen images of the Costa Rican landscapes, which have been a magnet for ecotourism for years. Costa Rica is recovering well from the hit it took during the pandemic, and for the year 2023, it was back to record numbers with 2.44 million tourists. That represents a 16.9% increase from that of 2022. This surge in tourism has been a vital contributor to Costa Rica's economy, making up a significant percentage of the country's GDP. The majority of the tourists that come to Costa Rica do so from the United States, Canada, and Europe. Now, the Costa Rican Tourism Institute provides pretty robust data on the tourism numbers for Costa Rica, breaking it all down by month and country of arrival. So I'm going to go ahead and include a link to that report for you in the description. Now let's focus on the challenges and some of the problems that the country of Costa Rica is currently facing. I'm going to look at income inequality, deterioration of the quality of education, workforce skills and unemployment, dysfunctional political system, choking overregulation, and the rise of criminal activity. Income inequality, the State of the Nation points out that it is at its highest level ever recorded in Costa Rica. So income inequality is much higher than the average OECD country and even high by Latin American standards. All this despite Costa Rica making considerable progress in other well-being dimensions such as health, environment, and life satisfaction. Now, some of the reasoning for this growth are changes in the economic structure of Costa Rica. It has transitioned from an economy predominantly based on agriculture to one focused more on services and technology. Second would be educational disparities. While it has a relatively high literacy rate and it does invest significantly in education, there are disparities between the quality of education in urban and rural areas. And then another factor is regional disparities. There are significant disparities in Costa Rica between, let's say, the Central Valley, experiencing much higher levels of development and wealth compared to the rural, coastal, and border areas of Costa Rica. The quality of education in Costa Rica has been a growing concern. Take a look at this graph. It illustrates a worrying trend in Costa Rican education. The declining performance in key subjects like reading, math, and science over the past few years is evident. Several factors contribute to this decline. Key among them are underfunding, disparities in resources between urban and rural schools, and notable shortage of teachers, especially in rural areas. Another critical issue is the mismatch between the skills taught in schools and those demanded by the job market. This gap contributes significantly to unemployment and underemployment, especially among the young in Costa Rica. Most quality employment opportunities are concentrated in the Central Valley, within the free trade zones that we discussed before. Now, in contrast, coastal and rural areas see fewer such opportunities, exacerbating these regional disparities. In response, the current government has initiated the Road to Education program, an ambitious plan aimed at revitalizing the education system in Costa Rica. Next, let's review the current state of the political system in Costa Rica. The political landscape in Costa Rica has undergone significant changes, moving away from its traditional two-party system. This older system was characterized by a degree of collaboration and power sharing between the two dominant political parties. However, the political scene is fragmented, now with 6 different political parties holding sway in the legislature. This multi-party environment has introduced complexities in governance and decision-making. Compounding this challenge is the election of a president who was an outsider to the traditional party system, having no affiliation with any political party prior to this election. This has led to a situation where the president faces considerable resistance from both long-standing political elites and mid-level bureaucrats. This resistance manifests in various ways, including obstacles to policy implementation and legislative gridlock. While the president currently enjoys popular support, the ability to maintain the support hinges on delivering on all campaign promises. If the administration fails to achieve its objective, there's a risk of eroding public trust and support, further complicating the governance challenges in Costa Rica. The next challenge that Costa Rica is facing is how to tackle the growing criminal gangs in the country. The number of murders in 2023 broke records as gangs fight for drug territory. The president sent over to the legislature several proposed laws aimed at tackling the rise in criminal activity, but to date, the legislature has ignored those proposals, frustrating the efforts of the current administration. An example of frustration is this recent incident where these 2 individuals, one of which is an ex-local cop, pulled firearms on 2 criminal investigation detectives. They were arrested a few days later, only to be released by a judge in 24 hours and back on the streets. In conclusion, let's see what the Costa Rica Financial Times has to say about this. And here's their headline: Costa Rica is deteriorating. These are the 8 conclusions of the State of the Nation report. They point out that there are less people employed now than there was in 2019. They point out that those who stop seeking employment, the majority are those age 50 and over and women. 3, that the cut in government spending has eroded social services. 4, that the sector of the economy, in this case 87% of the economy, is outside the free trade zones, and those are growing the slowest, while the free trade zones are growing fastest. 5, that the most vulnerable sections of the population use 64% of their income to pay for housing, food, and transportation. 6, we've already discussed. They indicate there's a growing crime wave with record homicides in 2023. 7, they point out how we're still pretty dependent on fossil fuels because we have not changed our transportation infrastructure in more than 30 years. And their final point, number 8, is the constant clashes between the executive branch and the legislature, making it very hard to govern. Well, I think that we have touched on the majority of topics that Costa Rica is dealing with and which we will have to follow closely in 2024. As always, thank you for watching. What do you think? Let me know in the comments.